Oh, I wanted this is an idea to make a hyperstate slash S. For example, as means right to make agreements. And so this is the donation of hyper forgiveness as a term that doesn't mean forgiveness, except for where and how every country is shown and would agree that we are victims, individually grouped and together, also by what is was sourced not from any of our names. We have entertained foundations. We have America's the founders of James Madison and the founders behind him. Their communications was changed, and that's measured, maintained, and the plan they used. Other is communicated, and that's measured and maintained. Self-valued rules with that. Otherwise, our own people sense for the breaching method that and or all exceptions, exception nature that appear to be in the demonstration come with demonstration of the same thing slash S. And that and how uses of truth to and directions to life, for example, relative to how many phenomena and illusions are relative to where and to how hundreds of countries are shared with campuses together and needs to protect each other's, you know, kids demonstrably. Where and how also this breaching method employed that since before America's founders were born, since before Russia's founders were born, since before modern religious messengers were born. People started defending themselves, requiring degradation of the actual quality of fact should be nature necessary to overcome things like criminal insidiousness, especially that form of it which used difference. The difference also between overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the three branches of government, the difference between them or the intelligence tied to them or the locations tied to anyone, and or the insidiousness of people A through Z, and or at their employment, all natures of communications, locations, and names next to every location and next to that. This breaching method senses through ourselves since before computers with the uses of relativity to database through databases, which instead of being used to discern the way the ancients did, is the smallest finite detail left out. For example, are we using systems anyway? Tactical ulterior from the one that is not is distinct identities of volume as physics, for example, as the value of metaphysics, not just as metaphysics, in other words, and as identities, volume science, which the ancients more probably and demonstrably, this is what English was revealed to teach. Like we have a semi-nature relationship to the complete identity of space slash existence, which we discern that way because we are inside of it. But anywhere we have any subject where we could discern what is true always, it comes with its complete identity relationship to itself. So when we can only do that variably, but that brings to it, where we could start learning more and more about things we don't understand. Like, for example, those two parts of time. Like we know the value of the seasons to an extent in the future before they are here. We're shown that. We know about the past to an extent too. What really was real. We know that, for example, even though it was so crazy tactically denatured, rolls with crazy laws, northern colonies and southern colonies before America's founders were born, rolls with it pretended self-value, or that body was sensed through a method slash S. Forgiveness is to discern by appreciating that breaching method and replacement. In other words, it's a value that was communicated by our founders for us to understand. A human fact should be nature breaching method, a torture slash extortion slash slavery method. And we're going to observe how it was sickly distinctly, but also sickly non distinctly. And that generates Nature's demonstrations of that too, which also the breaching method used and uses to measure and maintain roles, self-value with systems, and as systems tactical terror from its own. So as collusion slash S with phenomena where it was using not just the industries, everything, but negative value nature progressions, acts and natures from there to other spots or at those places, all location slash S. This breaching method propagated, only allowed to be capable of being standing criminal insidiousness natures of fact should be nature, of conviction nature, whether as formal identities of law, private, or regular people. This science is sharing identity. So where and how we have a conviction, we are no speaking for the law. But the law has stayed collusion because they had other communicating for themselves. I mean, for our James Madison, our founders, specifically develop styles who would pretend other or be sensed even to their own. In other words, knowingly, in this preaching that they've showed them, it could show them that they used experts pretending they have expertise or validity they don't. All exceptions, the exception nature, I used to pretend other with. And this breaching method knew they would do that. So nature itself and our founders communicate. Nature itself communicates, and our founders communicated for us to understand that human fact should be nature breaching method. Further, nature itself shows us that we should call it a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. Is because one of the things that breaching method observably did was measure and maintain roles also, other than how species volume science, species body of individual bodies, the human species body of individual bodies with group differences, with group difference slash S, and difference by an as that identity of value progression that is not each of the different distinct species, and the differences within those species grouped. But now tactical ulterior from this conversation as itself A through Z. The sciences are originally instilled. In other words, there are roles simultaneously, and the differences with guilt, where and how this breaching method knew that nature itself would continually demonstrate itself to ourselves. For example, demonstrating to us, even though they're not here, our founders had other, I know most of you don't realize this because you have other, just because it's published, you have the value of experts, private and campuses of all ages and nature, all interbranch. The difference between them, everyone to other locations, the difference between that of work criminal enterprises and private ones at the same time. There are problems with the borders because there has been differences, rackets. This is a certain type of victim slash hyper victim only allowed to pretend that anyone could speak for the law, start conversations pretending that the FBI has integrity they don't have. In other words, like with the Congress, incapable. The way they're asking questions, their nature is criminal insidiousness. More World Trade Center predicate acts are recorded, and the agencies have an extent of consciousness of this recorded. They have been hiding this from Judge Napolitano, and with him not realizing, but to an extent, if he heard my request. In other words, it's not hard to understand the interbranch have been switching names and forging names and planting collusion slash S with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, whole bunch of different countries. It is concentrated probate courts, families, involve wire crimes and these methods with the campuses in the newspapers with the same house/S with the police in courts, fabricating phone transcripts, fabricating and changing what's actually digitally recorded. All natures of investigators. Our founders left us to show how they were used and are used criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, rot, just like all location/S. Just like regarding pretend how anyone could even get away with debating all the things like, in other words, obviously we have black people's rights of eyes, and we have, in other words, we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. Nature is showing us about difference. See, but now we have an abridged constitution, and we have roles playing, forcing fact, treatment, nature, quality aspects in nature as criminal insidiousness, forcing identity theft, fraud, slander roles. We have some black KKK, Latino themed, Italian themed, interbranch families. On off Fox Connecticut News, on off WFSB, on off WTNH in their campuses, and collusion/S with people between each of the campuses. Influence, in other words, all the people, all the identities of law, overt criminal enterprises, private one, hundreds of nations shared, all legitimate means to hide lies and things like that, used for illegitimate. See, suits and ties, counters and exceptions, not even realized, used remotely when they're using differences. When in other words, the nature of the debate regarding a suit and tie, you don't leave out how the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. With a torture, extortion, slavery, fact, human nature, slavery, therefore physical slavery method against every single person, sickly, distinctly black people. And we are all hyper-native pure, which shows us the increasing value of the difference of how that breaching method used, the difference between and uses, the difference between Native Americans, colonists, and states, citizens who are not Native American. How come we leave out the Native Americans when millions of people come in? So anyone can only blame other things, others or self, because the locations, areas, and states will only allow that. Styles to force on the individual leaders. Interstates, all kinds of psychiatry, natures of organized crime. In other words, show people that have roles, collusion/S. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act, one dealing with groupings of criminal insidiousness natures. He was in collusion/S with all sides in criminal and civil cases in the courts themselves and in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center that day, even if he wasn't there or around. Intercities and interstates, intercities of Connecticut. He has roles used remotely as the Saudi equivalents of our agency's directors. And a whole bunch of other countries, Koreans, all these different countries on off Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College. And I don't know the ones named Olson. I'm Matt Olson and Eric Olson on Facebook has something to do with they're trying to make exceptions and bring things before courts where they can leave out and hide what they're doing. They're fake. In other words, all sides in criminal cases, in civil cases, and the courts, and the difference between that. Sometimes it's the people on off the prisons, sometimes it's on off the corrections offices themselves, which is also on a town line, just like the judicial branch offices know. In other words, and that's northern and southern difference, and it's the other town lines too. Same people involved with those town lines, which are eastern and western. How the suburbs would unfold, and how the cities would unfold, and how the suburbs next to Hartford, Connecticut, which would unfold as a suburban/urban city, was set up more so by the breaching method that had slavery entrenched north and south, northern colonies and southern colonies before our founders were born, to counter extort to force the other founders to be vaccines. I teach us things, but long. So no, this would have been discerned had not been self-valued roles. Also screening the motivations for this. Because there are more than one name /S beginning is involved with all natures of crime scenes. To discern this, we got to begin with the discernment of the scientific value. The name of the scientific value of a human fact should be nature breaching method. Nature itself is showing us. I'm not a lawyer. All sides of criminal and civil cases, and the private lawyers, their family members, people on and off the crime scenes, all use same time, measure and maintain. Then they're going to go back and describe reality. They're going to leave out more and more self-evaluate. No one's going to allow any identity of sophistication or non-sophistication, of overt criminal insidiousness or private criminal insidiousness, or of the three branches, or the difference between that and the intelligence tied to them, because that difference too is used. Because this breaching method exploits how difference works. And we are a value/value progression. So it measures and maintains the syntax tied to things like straits. See, we're going to have world wars if we don't pay attention to the human species body. Now names A through Z used as systems tactical ulterior from its own, and that's self-valued. That can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract the people at any location A through Z, where the species body is, to use short words properly, which capable of being discerned. See, everyone's calling it, except for how other things, others themselves, are simultaneously, increasingly self-valued, having been forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to be blamed for things the breaching method caused, like the World Trade Center attack. Not as America's name, not as Saudi's name, difference, no, but forced it effectively by forcing Saudis to collusions with whiting forensics, many tied to them. For example, in Wethersfield police, with families, private and formally, involved intercities with other police departments, Hartford Police, Rocky Hill Police, Newington Police, New Britain Police, West Hartford Police, departments and their families, retired and standing Wethersfield police chiefs, involved with the names Colo and DeMorrow, also with educators of theirs, involved on off the corrections offices of Connecticut and the judicial branch offices, as roles that forced Saudis to collusions with them, also with Ray Reynolds and their educators, who have been putting fake transcripts using, showing that they need to hide how they've been using all natures of investigators, criminally foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. They put a whole fake conversations with me, people I never even had conversations with at Hartford Hospital, and about police surveillance equipment and legal cases tied to my father with doctors, forged foreign doctors' names too, because they're involved with the identity differences racket in the cover-ups and readings of law and statutes, including by lawyers of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and lawyers of retired Wethersfield police chiefs, and involved with a Pruda family, for example, confessed and recorded, involved with people associated with the youth/S of the body dumping spots, including years after, that were timed collusions as people involved interstates and internationally, but also further hyper internationally with the World Trade Center attack. WFSB, for example, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles of this, and their roles with as as their roles with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases and depositions, like former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, increasingly involved with people, a McCord family, people tied to a McCord family, and people that apparently sued them, and their lawyers, involved with judges and prosecutors, and foreign and domestic medical families, involved and people who run prisons for all ages and natures, involve all kinds of scams, all kinds of natures of programs. So they employed all these identities who would speak for the law, would speak for title difference, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. They have the readings of statutes. They recorded themselves pretending others simultaneously, but knowing more than just to an extent, capable of discerning. They have roles, self-value, and criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw readings of statutes, as sequence shift nature styles that are being forced by nature itself, manifest. We could observe this, people. Judge Napolitano, we could show that he's going to either with a belief. In other words, how can anyone speak about natural law without nature's right here? We have relativity too with the black people. We have two eyes. The other species bodies have two eyes. We didn't invent that. They didn't invent it. That all these species and the bugs even have quality aspects, nature the same, distinctly but non-distinctly too, and simultaneously per something further hyper simultaneous, a further distinct identity of simultaneous nature. So I'm referring to it as a hyper simultaneous, and I'm referring to it as a nature rather than an identity, because a nature is what we discern, where and how we can only discern part of any identity. All exceptions in exception nature, for example, how we have all the complete parts of our body have a semi-nature relationship. Our body/bodies, as the human species volume time, have a semi-nature relationship to each person's. The little parts of your body have a semi-nature relationship to your complete identity, and that has semi-nature relationship to its complete identity, which we are shown with the species body being distinct too from the other species, but non-distinct and simultaneous, but again, further hyper-simultaneous. Vaccines. And nature shows when roles with those laws and impositions, to say the least, upon human fact-driven nature styles, it was as forced by nature itself. And that was sustained before America's founders were born. And those things it caused, those things plural, they were our value more than the means like that to control any nature of industry, any nation of countries, individually grouped or together, any grouping of countries that come to it. If you're entertaining locations, areas, states, fact-driven nature styles as is. So in other words, these are the descriptions of power. Forgiveness, because not to insult people, but these are descriptions of power, tactical ulterior. From the one as reality, as that led by that identity as space/existence, as that identity that shows each person. There's an extent of the past we know about is true always. There's an extent of what is now active grouped we know is true always. And there's the extent of the value, the identity of the value of the future we know about now. The season's not even here yet because in other words. But our special difference, our minds could be led by a special. So we make these hyper states. We make a means for Iran, Israel, Palestine. Obviously, in other words, we put a hyperstate and then we just stack means. But we have to do this knowing that roles with economics and value treatments, that have state collusion /S. One of the things we need hyper forgiveness as a term for is not just for forgiveness, but so we could designate portions of our country's bodies, those with the nuclear weapons, to just start mean stacking, to start working. In other words, and when they're talking, you want to say, in other words, to be gentlemen, for example. Even if you were wrong, I mean, if you were not wrong about something, you just say, "Oh, excuse me." In other words, because you're not gonna start have a conversation. Well, things are awkward. We're in systems, tactical territory. It's manifest. The suburbs are manifest from here to Russia to Ukraine. Having been part of that torture, extortion, slavery method, only capable of causing negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures, and while being a theater. Not realizing because the only means to cause positive value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures since before America's founders were born were through and as roles with a method /S that couldn't defend roles with that and afford to discern. Therefore, it would be capable of fathoming how this thing played difference. See, these are members of, these were black, quote, black, unquote, and quote, white, unquote, countries still playing roles together, playing games with the identity of the law. Because there's a certain type of victim /hyper victim at countries A through Z. And the differences between campuses and the qualities of them at A through Z, measured and maintained, quality as criminal insidiousness nature. Otherwise, that body was sensed, even if it was a majority of people, even if it was as everyone, black pupils. This is why and how the phenomena, plural, are being and had been generated so long that had stayed blamed wrongly, even when correctly, on why and how really the significance of these hyper-evidential things we have with the discernments since we were kids, having black people's rights of eyes, and having heard, so no matter if our schools were good or not, to an extent. See, but people can't be honest about that because it shows they see that their styles they were shown. This breaching method already showed all locations, areas, and states. At the same time, this kept overt criminal enterprises, private ones, all distinct natures of A through Z, with all instances descriptions, all names descriptions, crimes descriptions, roles used to measure and maintain roles with predicate acts with facts, styles, needs, and natures, way worse. As people increasingly who wouldn't be able to do anything but self-value roles with possession over the Connecticut's corrections offices and judicial offices, and at the prisons, against prisoners and against innocent people. Hold predicate acts methods against people to prevent them from having the right outcomes in cases. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed through communications. The news has also been planting evidence and then needing to hide it. And they're showing they need to pretend they're just trying to do stories real fast. Fox Connecticut News recently, just like tonight, had a story on a state police officer staff. That might be tied to what I've been saying in my videos, because state police are increasingly involved with people who increasingly got brought up by the interbranch, have been forging and switching names, Connecticut intercities, with police departments for preventing writing in the courts. Connecticut's Harper courts and the Britain Superior Court in Connecticut District Court leading up to the World Trade Center attack. They had already had collusions at locations with federal evidences crimes and child offenders and elderly offenders and roles with abuses of veterans. But it also involves the difference between there or next to those locations. Everything was a collusion /S with another name /S with every subject treatment. See, every subject came with and comes with the hyper evidential. I'm not a lawyer, but we could discern how lawyers on all sides of criminal and civil cases, the difference between that and just people, in other words, lawyers pretend they're just speaking, they're trying to have free speech. They're leaving out exception nature as collusion /S. So again, the difference between that or in other words, that's why people need to follow mandated law. And they also pretend it's personal after they attach us to fake conversations. So WFSB recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have roles with a whole bunch of natures of victims and perpetrators against them, and roles with the difference of that used too. But it's also with people at WTNH and Fox Connecticut News with the intelligence next to them too. So since founding, the police will offensively communicate to anyone, to each age of fact, treatment nature, sickly, distinctly, the police forms. That and how the executive branch can't be trusted. And they want that other pretended anyway. The same thing with the judicial branch and the political branch and the exceptions. This breaching method knew that they would do that. It measures and maintains that, rolls with itself, self-value. Certain type of victim /hyper victim, it knew it would have to respond as fact treatment nature to the real cause /S of criminal insidiousness, whether positive in the form of positive syntax natures, therefore names, or negative. So this breaching method needs criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and negative treatments simultaneously, syntactically. So it could keep other things, so it could keep from discernment its identity of relativity to ourselves. That comes through the discernment and appreciation proper, apprehension proper. Once discerned, the value of the human fact treatment nature breaching method, how it is valued because it is one thing true always. That was the cause of those crazy laws that were entrenched in the method /S by them, using databases tied to all locations /S, using laws as I learned in notes at Central Connecticut State University, that made it a crime for anyone even have been heard discussing building infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversations. It's not just because that was criminal per nature itself. It's because there's a breaching method /S that was used in the very design, and it is using that very design to cause negative value, because it knew nature would demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts of nature because of that grounds identity of relationship to themselves. Native Americans will tell you this, some of them at least. We are and have been systems tactical terrier from its own. Native Americans also, for their education was some ways more so influenced by the criminally foreign influence, hyper criminally foreign influence, the pretending other, to keep their difference and their needs to counter things associated with that. And to counter that, to keep those counters collusions, blaming other things, others, ourselves, even when correctly, exactly the way it needs, Black people. In other words, everyone speaks about black and white, leaving out the breaching methods employments of that, tactical from nature's employments of it, and which comes with revolution, which comes with answers, revelations, way more. But we have this replaced too. People pretending things are debatable that aren't. And we're going to refer to this. So there's a quality of fact keeping nature as criminal insidiousness that is forced. That's why when you observe treatments, no matter who they're for or against, of the nature of debate, the nature of debate contains quality aspects of nature and roles. Self-valued, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Otherwise, that body is sensed again, including if it is a majority of people, including if it is everyone, black pupils. Here to judge freedom, we must observe it abridged and directions to get it unabridged. How it changed, and that's self-value too, and not used remotely, not just there at our formal locations. See, we have problems with criminally foreign influence uses of all natures of positions, including with the campuses. And with the difference between kids and adults in syntax. That's one of the things the breaching method measures and maintains. Shock in all roles. Otherwise, that body is sensed. We could discern this game. You're going to see. I shouldn't have to give away my things, but there might be world wars, and there's obvious. This is playing the countries with nuclear weapons. If they just ask the other country, the rest of the world will help. Additionally, you guys stay communications because this breaching method set up people to need food resources from other locations through its systems. While it was knew that would be manifest with where and how it stays all formal natures of all locations /s and all locations next to them. Even if you homeschool your kids, people that were in communications with when they were young, years later, there's going to be problems. Everyone's going to need to hide the same sequence shifts, find out active progressive lies. Increasingly, the hospitals, places, since and God willing, when people born are healthy, you still long and care for medicine and for health care and for health. In other words, see, but originally and still this breaching method knew that truth. It could get people to use it for a lie there and at other locations, right? Those critical places. Hartford Hospital has an Institute of Living founded in 1822, with slavery still entrenched in northern colonies and southern northern states and southern states. For the breaching methods use /s of that sickly distinctly against everyone too. Its use functionally for where and how. Sickly non-distinctly is left out, but people would speak for reason. People would speak for art and its value. Anyway, black pupils. So nature, hypernative, species, body, volume, science. We must appreciate indigenous. We must have the means too. In other words, there's three natures of our founders. And each group wasn't getting along with themselves because they weren't allowed to. So they had to figure, it's not if they get along or not. They had, in other words, everyone's speech was being measured and maintained collusions. You entertain that, you're hurting other people, you're helping them as collusions. Then you can't defend that and afford to discern the breaching method. Again, which needs criminal insidiousness natures of positive or negative to keep itself from discernment and to keep that scientific value from discernment. All exceptions used positive by it too, to sense. This is why and how people, in other words, and they blame on other things, others themselves, exactly the way the breaching method needs. For example, and they will when they're presented with where and how and why. Actually, James Madison's plan and communications about that plan and the founders behind him, their communications, that plan. In other words, it's not there. It's others being pretended and convicted. In other words, in place. Those truths we're leaving out how what everyone said was measured and maintained by a breaching method, rolls with itself that you can't defend and afford to be, let alone to protract. Short words with convictions proper. They work with conviction nature proper. And I'm saying that as anyone. So we're going to, in other words, anyone entertains those laws and systems, nature itself will demonstrate more and more criminal and citizens' natures, more and more wrongdoers, predicate acts, people with and as roles with predicate acts, whole predicate act methods, needs, natures, and styles. Like when people say, oh, take your meds and things like that. They've been putting faked medical evidence on a mass scale. A whole bunch of people with Harvard Hospital's Institute of Living recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with a whole bunch of people who planted evidence on my street since I was a kid. And they also have rules of the World Trade Center attack and fake conversations with me about that. So he's not my doctor, the Leahy family. There are two people with the name Brendan Leahy, I believe. I know there's one of them. I believe the other one was his father because it was on the book. They're putting fake conversations with me. They're pretending others recorded at places that are filmed 24/7. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has roles also with Trinity College, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, with an officer who uses the name Darth Vader over the phone to obstruct justice and for a chilling effect, and with a Joshua Stryker involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with me and other agencies on the state judicial branch offices. Also with Eric Oliveri, who also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. People involved with the name Olson and Eric Jensen also said that. And Eric Olson and Matt Olson have something to do with state police, with Jensen and other ones I don't know, who have been planting evidence on all sides of my house and at the campuses I went, each of the ones. And intercities, they brought confessions that were all at once and like involving untimely deaths, including one at Trinity College. And Robert Rodriguez, one of the ones who planted evidence on my street from another area, who's all names all along Route 3, had collusions with federal evidence as crimes, trying to make it look like they had conversations or ties to me, while other people do it so they can pretend I'm lying. And he confirmed that on Facebook. Also, his roles with another untimely death off campus, and right next to the house that was involved with the Trinity College one. And even if it was made up, they have roles with federal evidence as crimes, planting a fake letter, and with people involved with the border too, involved with the issues in the news. Venezuela tied to it, Eric Jensen, with state police locations along the Brown Turnpike. Also with Jonathan Mayan and Sandra Spot, Chet Casper, involved with their teachers and with a former Mayor Gold. Increasingly, people with a former Mayor Gold and his family have roles of predicate acts with facts. When I was in 1st to 3rd grade, and when I was in 4th, 5th, 6th, they're putting fake ties and natures of ties between people. And, people you don't even know and never see. That's what they're doing. They're keeping their timed collusion /S with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. That's why they can't get on paper. I've been asking Judge Napolitano's social media, because they use wire crime acts and methods. They put fake transcripts. Weathersfield police have roles with more than just FBI. with worse than just criminal incompetence. Use remotely criminally foreign influence, their difference. The branches of government individually grouped to use remotely criminally foreign influence. All identities, like the UN has roles with all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes and natures of organized crime, with databases associated with the courts, prisons, and all their natures of fact-keeping nature. It's one, people keep using words like genocide. Who's at the other end of the definition? You guys have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw defenses of counters to groupings that wouldn't have been had there not been all kinds of natures of organized crime for methods of predicate acts with facts, methods, self-valued roles. In other words, they're setting those kids up, and they're with people way worse, and like where they're in positions on the stores and things like that. Even if that was all made up, when the news shows those things, you have to ask yourself, what are things about, even if everything was made up? What are witch trials about, even if everything was made up? It was about that torture, extortion, slavery method, singular. And that generated more and more methods. And then people had to respond to that and the methods, incapable of doing so. As styles, pretending other anyway. Certain type of victim / hyper victim. Even though the identity is the law. Stay hyper evil. So to change this, we need to force equality of fact-keeping nature, where we can solve where and how the criminal insidiousness and violence and criminal insidiousness natures of peace, collusions are discernible. And this is where and how the police are switching and forging names and using their difference where it's a non-difference. Wethersfield police have roles with Rock Hill police families and retired Wethersfield police and Hartford police forms. And their narratives and natures regarding the law, while their predicate acts of facts, nature's predators' role too. So forgiveness is to not leave out the breaching method. And to do this, we could put a hyper state where, in other words, where everything's going as is, and suits and ties, counters, and exceptions are shock and awe, and we're just going downhill. And we could stack means. If we stack means that the whole world's behind it, like at Palestine and Israel, in other words, plans that are positive. In other words, better than free, because the world will help the countries with nuclear weapons. Because, in other words, this breaching method set up all tactically denatured Earth. Even, in other words, it set up all natures of industry and the difference of that to be used. So you can't just settle this with cases. Because in other words, all sides of criminal and civil cases in the courts themselves, the lawyers, their family members, already having been influenced by the use of location /S and roles, self-valuing, other communicated about the needs to value, and about the actual value of the branches of government themselves. The nature of debate. Because what's actually positive, we're supposed to be able to speak honestly about what's positive and negative simultaneously. People pretend things are debatable that are not. How we have black people's whites of eyes, and the breaching method assigned that to communicate other before our founders were born is not inseparable. I mean, it's inseparable from legitimate, proper, fact-keeping nature, quality necessary. Aspect necessary, nature necessary to overcome the natures of criminal insidiousness, plural, individually connected there. Like as the value of it. Sickly, distinctly, north and south. We never hear of that, because instead of us understanding it, we have us self-valuing names, needs, natures, and styles, blaming other things others are so. using all nature, using how they have the most knowledge of their sciences, of their religious books to get over what's the value of sequence truth, for example, too. That's why you value that breaching method having been sustained against Native Americans first. But you don't blame it on people who also had it first sustained upon themselves. And also it was making, before America's founders were born, it had been sustained against Native Americans and U/S of things it caused, like Native Americans to have to fight with each other about fact, shaping nature, quality aspects of nature, or agree with each other to keep the quality of fact, shaping nature, criminal diseases, nature. The causes of it blamed on other things other than themselves, even when correctly exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs, like blaming on the white man, while they're white too. Native Americans more white than me. In other words, the three natures of founders. There's the Native Americans. There are those founders behind James Madison who were Native American, not Native American. Even if there were no Native Americans physically behind him, that's the value of the Constitution unabridged. That's the value of nature. So there were no means to be let it known that it was going to be a quality of fact, human nature, even a tenth of it. That person would be in trouble through their own people. It would freak people out for legitimate reasons. It's a complete fact, human nature possession. Facebook recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they have employees and people associated with them consciously that colluded with the FBI, who also, to an extent, consciously. Even on Twitter, after the principal child abuser was put in prison, they called him an upskirt nature in the news. I caught him involved with our organized crimes and other adults and kids collusions, forced, including with the news at the same time, on, off, and next to the campuses and at corners of streets. They have neighbors of Paul Kelly and of people named Violet, a Mike Violet and a Mark Violet, Furniture Place associated, and people with the military, foreign and domestic, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, on off Hartford Hospital with them and with the names next to them. That used to be there at the Morals Market and where they are now. And Joe and Iolo's Kitchen. And I believe it's still near the Buckley High School, right there, near not far from Hartford Hospital too. These are all people all along Franklin Avenue, Wethersfield Avenue. In other words, and where the Berlin Turnpike turns into runs into the heart of Hartford at the end of the Berlin Turnpike. A whole bunch of names associated with their pretended to know me and lied about me behind my back and pretended as rules with a class thing. People aren't even in the same classes. They're involved with some black KKK, Latino themed, Italian themed, Canadian themed, Mexico themed, Venezuela themed families that have collusions, Korean themed, same ones. Nick LaPera and Mark Violet have roles with Korean families and people with the name Ray Cololo and Joe DeMauro involved with the confessions of the Wethersfield police. Also them pretending not to realize, where an extent they don't realize because they've been used remotely criminally foreign influence since they were kids. People of all ages and natures. Otherwise that body was sensed. So in other words, we have nature itself shows us with means to show us where we hear convictions made by history, that how they are being and have been made improper. Convictions of formal law, private law, are regular people. And so the value of if something is people, the reason why people need to cite their sources is made value that it's not consciously. The courts recorded themselves pretending because they don't see things written. In other words, they were fabricating evidences into the databases at courts, with the FBI involved, with the branches of government bled together, individually grouped together, used remotely criminally foreign influence there, and the difference between it being there at the campuses and between the campuses. Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, is just one of multiple campuses involved in intercities through time with mayors and people tied to mayors, and for a whole bunch of foreign and domestic putting fake things in databases and acting as roles, acting tied to it at other locations. There are means to discern all sides in criminal and civil cases and the law identities at the same time, self-valued, increasingly used remotely with motivations narratives, leaving out other names involved. Exactly the way it wanted and needs. They have the worst roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. They value where and how there are sick people because they were abused specifically to keep the difference, to keep the predicate acts with sick predicate acts with facts method /S roles, needs, and natures of the formal law. Given means to pretend, oh, we're trying to counter criminal instances, groups, no, criminal enterprises. So nature uses how we are group differences by its group, by its identity relationship to itself, difference. Its difference of relationship to itself, where and how and why we're actually grouped. And species body of individual bodies with group difference /S. Comes also with means to discern a further hyper difference. Again, just like how, why, and how our species body and other species bodies didn't invent, why and how all the different species bodies have those quality aspects in nature of consciousness that we share. There's an extent of consciousness that even insects share, awareness, further than just awareness of each other. Vaccines, oxygen things belong. Someone please ask Judge Napolitano to get Connecticut courts and Wethersfield police onto paper, and with the FBI and the other agencies. They want to play a game. We're going to draw a map, because that's what one of the things that unites people that pretend they don't understand me online and in real life after they have rules attached to me to fake conversations with themselves. They've been doing this since I was a kid, behind my back from other classrooms. They may try to make a fake exception with increasingly a Rick Faglione and people tied to a Mr. Neville have roles of people involved with the World Trade Center attack through their roles with other natures of organized crime, knowingly or not. In other words, a Mr. Puzzi is also involved with this, and a Rob Rodriguez, and the places associated with themselves, and the people next to them, and the difference of that is also used. Also with Daryl Chandler, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with this, and with Koreans. In other words, and I know my name, I don't even know their name since I was a kid. And they're the roles with all these different countries. And Saudis, they forced collusions with them. I don't know if it's a Korean guy there's a Rocky Hill, a tennis center. In other words, there's a Michael Kerr and a Joe DeMauro who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed there are some intelligence people. See, these are people involved with the Saudis too, planting evidences with intelligence associated with the places. Also at Powerhouse Gym, same ones associated with former FBI Director Robert Luskin. In other words, please, someone get Judge Napolitano, because these are also people involved with weapons and poisons and planting evidences on all sides of people's houses and other people's to measure and maintain roles where they keep bringing things before courts to have family members and intimate ties involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones at the same time, not legitimately with the unmarked police warrants, etc. not legitimate with any nature of investigation of humanity. Quinnipiac University also has roles with the judges and prosecutors involved, and on and off, and with the whole predicate acts and methods on off the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices has something to do with their roles with differences on the ground, like a field across the street from my house. There's a guy with a red pickup truck who's one of the one, and people who recorded had conversations with like a Kevin Dillon, and people associated with him put fake things in databases with overt criminal enterprises for private ones, and people all along Two Rod Highway and Hangdog Lane involved with probate judges, involved with drugs and medicines crimes with little kids and against elderly and veterans, and with names next to it, and the difference of their roles with organized crimes and the difference of natures of organized crimes. These criminal enterprises, this breaching method knew would group wrong with experts like former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with criminally foreign influence uses of his lawyer and his co-defendants, Robert Chevrolet, and his co-defendants like former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin's co-defendants like Thaddeus Grabowski is one of the names on Fox Connecticut News, involved with the Britain Superior Court's Facebook page, and Connecticut's District Court names, and Hartford Courts involved with predicate acts before and after the World Trade Center attack, predicate acts against me, and with the people on with the intelligence next to the Fox Connecticut News, and next to WFSB, and next to WTNH, which is next to WTNH is the FBI also. So they have wire crime action methods roles and digital crimes roles with that principal child defender, also with Whiting forensics, increasingly tied to the name Colello, planting evidences with former Mayor Gold and other people on off and next to parks, planting evidences and fake ties to kids, make fake exceptions and have people film it. And these are increasingly people. Perone and Kerr are also people, and that next to the Fox Connecticut News with the intelligence community. And there's people with Allegro's Cafe that I don't know. And in other words, I think that's the kid. There was a nice guy, and I just said it was nice one time on Facebook. They were trying to make a fake exception, but then I forgot that. That's a demonstration of the same thing. They play games like that. They pretend they have legitimate evidences. In other words, to contradict that, people contradict themselves when they speak online. So Facebook has collusions with proven digital offenders of kids. They have further sexual and medical offenders of kids, uses of their own kids. There's a Brendan Leahy who has his own daughter's pictures involved, further with upskirt natures and sexual and medical offenders of kids. There's a Michael Emmett, and there are people further with the digital policing and training of intelligence with the schools, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw, including judges and prosecutors, a whole bunch of people on the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, a whole bunch of people tied to a Mike Pandoff also brought this up. So in other words, a whole bunch of people next to Trinity College have roles, and next to Central Connecticut State University have connections to each other. And they have time collusions with judges and prosecutors since I was a kid, and with a whole bunch of different countries, Afghan leaders and kids. These are people involved with World Trade Center predicate acts. These are judges and prosecutors and their family members of Hartford Courts. Their roles with Eric Burgess and his confessions and requests to help from me and from others. And they forced societies to collusions with the FBI director, Robert Luskin, and various natures of courts. Family members at the same time with foreign and domestic military and criminal enterprises and proven child abusers, leaders of kids, and people, child abusers, and roles with the countering bodies like the Department of Children and Families have roles with the people that intimate ties with the people that run that and investigators with that, and ones with the Department of Corrections that we use criminally foreign influence, and with a whole bunch of people from other countries, like a Joshua what's his name? It's a whole bunch of people that I have classes that with pretend try to make fake exceptions and sequence shift and planted evidences. Adjuster Klavinskas is one of the people involved all along Route 175 and with conjunctions to it as people involved with all sides in criminal and civil cases, and the courts were involved with predicate acts with facts, and some black KKK theme, Confederate flag theme, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed collusion/S with some Italian, Latino, black KKK theme fakes. In other words, not one of the identity of the law, not one identity of investigator was legitimate. The reason we have the problems is because the difference of the collusions at the campuses or at the crime scenes or at the homes of themselves, the people next to everyone, because this is the sense and sensibilities. They're making all victims/hyper victims blame other things, others, or selves, and self-value rolls with that. Otherwise, that body is sensed. So everyone just to keep their mouths shut, or when the people with the speak, we weren't allowed to address their actual quality as fact treatment nature. That's criminal insidiousness. The natures of the debate of the presidents and of the vice presidents. Criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and negative treatments and identity treatments, therefore names treatments. Judge Napolitano, please follow mandated law at last for your branch, even if you're retired. The difference between that too. In other words, this is why the streams of people are going into the courts in New Jersey, New York, etc. These are sick courts. I'll show them how to think because they came through 6 schools. We will learn about James Madison's plan, why and how he had to counter extort the other founders, and how George Washington, no one allows anyone to be honest about his extortion, and the value. People were shown that on a mass scale, they pretend they don't see evidences. Or where's that written? Dishonestly. Because in other words, get them on paper, one name and sequence, please. Let's go. Weatherfield Police, get them on paper, one name and sequence. They have 3 times they recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Kevin Dillon and people tied to him were planting evidence all sides of my house. They have digital and sexual crimes, planting evidence of speaking fake things into records with this Judge Killian and his family members. Also, our communications locations and collusions with news predicate acts. Let's get them on paper. And this Leahy family, let's go. Let's get them on paper. I'll show you what how to think. I'll show these judges with the probate courts, especially tied to this Ray Cololo house too. Concentrated more than 3, I believe. Yeah, definitely more than 3, because probate courts are where, in other words, they do settlements of the last instances at elderly homes, stuff like that, where they had drugs and stuff. They'll hurt the people. There's a torture method where you're going to complain about this. Well, there's this problems and that. It's a torture method. In other words, and from off those locations, from off all locations, collusions with use of, again, of adult or kid. So that's why we have some sick fake integrity and getting away with it. For example, how they get away with it. They know they already recorded themselves using words like adult and kid exactly for the breaching method. This is multi-front against adult, middle age, adult senior, and kids. All natures of difference, black pupils. Don't forget, we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. We have nature's identity itself teaching us about difference. We're going to follow natural law, and the Constitution's value unabridged. And Marbury versus Madison interpreted not leaving out that breaching method and his communications regarding it, not leaving out how it's a replacement either. Vaccines, they want forgiveness too. So here, in other words, this is what we do. The nuclear holding nations will better than free. Pay for better than free, and the whole species body within them. They'll make it illegal where everyone could come help for better than free. The countries that we rely most upon and that get hurt the most about how A through Z are sickly, tactically denatured. Only landscape theory and demonstration of other. There are proofs that what caused the Sahara Desert is that a mountain was taken down. And that was because this breaching method knew too. It had to do all kinds of crazy things and sustain roles with it, because nature is going to increasingly demonstrate to us a breaching method is a scientific value. Better than perfectly. The best campuses and the worst campuses, and the difference of that, those members and people tied to it use that difference too, with logic, nature, debate, to screen that. That difference is used too by the breaching method while everyone's using it. In other words, okay, I'll try vaccine, teach you things. So in other words, we can make these two play. The best nature itself is showing us to put down. At other places too, like Africa, there's places to put down, but in Palestine and Ukraine, to put down what both Ukraine and Russia would immediately agree to, which means better than free, because in other words, it will involve the rest of the countries from different climates, for example, with different food sources, with vitamin C, etc. Because this breaching method made countries into beasts that have people, so many people hungry at once through systems tactical ulterior from its own. To play that, all we have to do is a species body working together and put down these means here, and use the word hyper forgiveness. Means don't forgive another, not taking, not claiming guilt for a country or something. See, if they do that, everyone's speaking and pretend they have law. That means legitimate respect human nature to solve things. Not one person has appreciated properly that breaching method as a scientific value, and that's discernible. But we could heal this by putting down, by just paying attention. Nature shows us what to do. In other words, so I'll donate through America if you guys will pay attention. That you be rewarded as countries holding nuclear weapons. And if you guys say, well, we're gonna do that, if you guys help us, we want to help these countries do this, so they'll always give us some food. We're gonna start with the food and water. We have means to make crystal clear water. That's what everybody longs, not just President Trump. That's why he wants to make crystal clear. I know how to make America great again, too. If we all at countries A through Z, America and Russia and Ukraine, the suburbs look almost exactly alike. People mow their lawns, take away the grass. Way less worms, if at all. In other words, than there used to be. They know, and worms, when it rains, the bugs go away from the air on the top of the ponds, the bodies of water. When it rains, that's why we used to see in puddles worms all the time. In other words, there are no longer worms in the puddles. Once in a while, but they used to be nowhere near. If you dig in the soil, it's a different texture, nature, all kinds of reasons. In demonstration of how we've been a system tactical ulterior from its own. And it demonstrates individual, grouped, and simultaneous demonstrations of that while with and as a hyper simultaneous that is even more valuable while as that value. And we could ignore its value, but it forces that value from here, lethal IDs. That is more probably how it was appreciated by the science of ancient pantheism. See, but then criminally foreign influence uses of the science's names and people's names could not afford to have discerned the revelations of science is unabridged and education proper, not criminally foreign influenced as it has stayed. Criminally identified and foreign influence uses of identities of difference, like the identities of law ever had integrity. too. So they should have forgiveness because they have predicate acts with facts, way methods, acts, and natures way worse than little kids they put in jail. And people that they torture, extort, and frame that to never even be able to get before they even have a trial. All kinds of scams or readings of the law they had to pretend this breaching method made A through Z. Identities of knowledge of good and evil, roles, needs, nature, styles. Can't defend that and afford to discern, let alone to protract. Short words with convictions proper. Black pupils. Yeah, 10. See, and look, look how they have white, Caucasian. Are you white, Caucasian? Are you, in other words, do they want to play games about, get on one page. Let's go. More World Trade.